Well, hello, good afternoon. Chris Watney, Southern Cross Health Society, and that is the insurance part of the business. There are other parts of the Southern Cross group as well. I always like to ask of an audience, do we have any members in the room? Oh my goodness me, fantastic. That's probably the most I've ever seen. How many of you get that from your employer? Okay, that's good. So that's probably quite a few clients of ours, so I'll be very polite and nice and kind to you. What I thought I'd do is, I have got some slides here and I might pick a couple of those to talk to, but I thought, given some of the questions that are coming out and some of the themes that are coming up, particularly I thought I'd talk about measurement and data and ROI and those sorts of things, because that's some of the stuff that we've been really focusing on a lot with our own program. And yes, we are taking these sorts of programs out to the market now, and a big part of my team is highly engaged in building wellness programs, apps and tools and toolkits and these sorts of things that we can take out to our clients that you can use in your businesses. I'll try to do as a little plugging of that as I possibly can. And talking, in fact, what really inspired all of that was our own program, which is called Switch to Well. Now, you might have heard a little bit about this because we have been out talking about this in the last couple of years. But Switch to Well is a program that's been going for about 12 years now. So it's quite a mature program. And from those early days when it really was about 10,000 steps and smoking cessation, it's really come a long way in its, maturity, in its sophistication. And there was a moment in time when we realized that if we were ever going to get from that 20 to 30% engagement with the program up to the engagement levels we have now, which is about 94, 95%, then we'd have to pay people. And I'm afraid that's just the truth. So you have to incentivize. So when we realized that, as I say, we saw that step change take place, and the great thing that gave us was that gave us a lot of data. So the kinds of data that we collect through our program does relate to activity. We all wear Fitbits, activity trackers, and though they can't tell you where the person is at that moment in time, like everyone believes when we hand them out. But if you participate in Switch to Well, then for every day you get over 10,000 steps, you can add another $2 to your salary. I should say, by the way, that's capped at $1,000. You can't earn more than that, but you can earn $1,000 more salary by participating in the program. We have a nutritionist that comes on site. You get Switch to Well points for attending the nutritionist. We have all sorts of seminars and programs and events that are run, and those are rewarded as well. And even doing simple things like attending a blood pressure check or something like that, you can get points. And it really is through that application of our points, which you can convert into salary, that sort of made the big success for us. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to say that sometimes you just have to take that step. Now, that makes it quite an expensive program for us. So I love hearing about organisations that really do this stuff on, as you say, the smell of an oily rag, because I think that characterises most businesses as they start to try and do this thing. Our program costs about $1,600 per person per year. And that's quite a lot of money, but I can tell you now that we get 140% return on that. And the reason I can tell you that is because we've had Massey University in for the last couple of years, doing some work on the data that we have, and that is data around absenteeism, around presenteeism, around churn or retention, employee retention, and those sorts of things. We know that people who participate in our program, and we, by the way, don't just look at that as one homogeneous unit of people. We look at how much they engage in it. So, for example, if it was in quartiles, you'd have the lower quartile who might be earning, say, 20 points a month, so not really that engaged. And then you have the top quartile earning maybe 90 or 100 points a month. Okay, so even the difference between there, we measure that. We know that moving somebody from that lower quartile to the upper quartile, we see $1,024 more benefit a month from that person, from that employee, in terms of economic utility. So if you have someone that's engaged, highly engaged in the program, they're 50% less likely to leave the business. And we know how much it costs to replace somebody within the business, right? So you can put real numbers to this stuff. So we think we save about $4.5 million in replacing, sorry OCG, you probably don't want to hear this. We save about $4.5 million in cost of replacing lost staff. We know that our absenteeism drops by 50% from somebody who's highly engaged in our program to somebody who's not engaged in our program. So we see about 0.6 days a month absence rather than 0.9 days a month absence. We know that we see presenteeism, again, halve over that similar sort of thing. And these are all things you can put real numbers to. You can put real value to that. And so we think we get about 140% return on our $1,600 investment. Now, we realise that is the Rolls-Royce gold-plated level of investment within this stuff. But if you're spending $1,000 per employee on health insurance, you're kind of already in that space. The program that we've got that we're taking out to market's priced at $60 per person per year, so it's a lot more affordable. But there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done by the organisation. So that ROI, it's possible. The data, I think, is there. If you take time to go and look for it, and you can really start to understand the value of these things and actually what you're trying to get. A couple of other things that I think are really important that came through from the survey, and we've heard once or twice. You can't do this without buy-in from the top, and it's not just the chief executive, it's the board. And the board have to believe this stuff. And again, I think if you just make it a health and safety discussion, then you'll get to a point, you'll get somewhere. But I think it's got to go beyond that too. Now, we're not holding ourselves up as experts in health. We're not going to be able to mitigate any of your legal risk around health and safety, but certainly the things that we can do, I think, from within the HR world and the world that we live in, we can actually really sort of help to meet some of those new legal requirements. But if it doesn't come from the board, then I think that we've seen those engagement numbers. They just don't come through. I think I read in the report that it was between 20 to 40% engagement would be typical in these sorts of programs. As I say, we see about 95% engagement, and it's that sort of engagement I think we're striving for. Not always easy to achieve, but to really sort of get through the 20 to 40% is difficult. So the other thing I was going to talk about is perhaps a little bit about our Being Well program. So why are we doing this? Well, we're a health insurer, absolutely, and we're 56 years in health insurance, and that's what you best know us for. But we have a mission that we now want to move to more of an assurance kind of proposition. So we were talking about it earlier in the panel. I guess the analogy might be not being at the bottom of the cliff anymore, but being at the top of the cliff. In fact, we want to try and keep people off the edge of the cliff. Is kind of where we're really trying to play. But Southern Cross as a brand, we want to try and move much more into that space around the assurance, so assuring people of their health and well-being, not just fixing people up when they're not well. We've run surveys too. These basically back up exactly what you saw in the pack there and in the white paper. 92% of professionals say it's important to work for an employer that has a workplace wellness program, and yet only 56% of professionals think their employer does enough to support their health and well-being. So plainly a mismatch there. But employees who believe the company does care about their health and well-being, 38% more engaged, 28% more likely to recommend their workplace, 18% more likely to go the extra mile, and 17% more likely to be there in 12 months' time. We do think that the penetration of wellness programs into New Zealand is fantastic. 64% claim a wellness program, and I think actually it's probably higher than that. Most organisations are doing something in this space. We heard about EAP earlier. Even if it's just providing fresh fruit and vegetables or maybe subsidised gym memberships, it's all really in this whole space. What we tend to find is it just needs to be packaged up, given a name, given a brand, and presented back as a program. And I think that actually most organisations really are doing quite a lot in this space already. So I talked a little bit about some of those numbers. So we've seen our absenteeism reduce 25% over the last 5 years, and I say that comes with real economic benefit. A 31% reduction in turnover, and an 82% of employees who participate in our program claim that it's had a positive impact on their health and well-being.
Can you just explain or elaborate what presenteeism means and how you measure that?
Presenteeism is people who come to, well, we define it as people who come to work who are sick and shouldn't be there. So it's about then subsequent lost time and so on. Of course, they're also infecting other people, and it's sort of, so yeah, presenteeism. Absenteeism much better understood, I think, than presenteeism typically, but it's getting a bit more exposure. So this thing here about positive impact on health and well-being. One of the more embarrassing things that happened to me recently was we had just announced our program. We launched that at a conference we ran a couple of weeks ago, and we had some reasonable media interest in that, which was good. I happened to mention that I might have just run my first half marathon as a result of the Switch to Well programme, which I was quite pleased about. And lo and behold, they managed to get from my Facebook page a picture of me going across all sweaty and not very nice looking, getting across the line, and that was all over Fairfax newspapers. So thank you very much for that, Fairfax. Anyway, so be careful what you admit to a journalist. But it does make a difference. It does make a big difference to people's lives. And I think we can report on this stuff in terms of engagement survey. Our engagement across our business, 84%. This is all part of that sort of employer story, but ultimately it comes down to the data and what that can really tell you in economic terms. So we might have also got a slide here on our own programme. Forgive me for doing that. But there's quite a bit that we're putting into that. It sort of ranges really from the health risk assessment right through to the campaign calendars, lots of toolkits, information, content that can be used. Plus also we have an app that we've developed which will help, I think, employees to engage with their own health and well-being, sets challenges, gets that kind of that change in behaviour that we heard a little bit about, based on the 21 days to behaviour change methodology, and also, of course, gives great data back to the organisation. We're very careful around that it's anonymised and aggregated. Obviously, all privacy is respected through that process, but I think already we're seeing some really good feedback from the information we can give. So there we go. Forgive the plug. I think that's our story.